Welcome back for another episode of Utopia. Today we will be taking you down the Colorado River for a 2-day float on the Westwater Canyon section, with rapids such as Skull Rapid and Sock It To Me. You just know it will be thrilling. But first, we recently traveled to Emery County near the Cleveland Quarry, where our friends at the Utah Division of Wildlife were collecting bats. Bats are important indicator species for overall ecosystem health. If bat populations suddenly show signs of decline, it is likely an indicator that the larger ecosystem is out of balance. But don't take it from me, because we met with the experts and got it all on camera. Here's Sean King with our story on Utah bats.
Bats can often conjure negative images: vampires, rabies, coronaviruses. Let's dispel some of these myths and offer a more evolved understanding of these spectacular creatures of the night. Let's discover what an important part they play in the natural ecosystem. Bats actually share things in common with humans. As mammals, they give birth to live offspring, and the mothers feed their babies milk. But bats are the only mammal that flies. North America is home to 44 species, and 18 make their home right here in Utah. Throughout the world, there are nearly 1,000 species of bats, most of which have remained unchanged over the last 50 to 60 million years. Many bats in Utah live here year-round and hibernate during the winter. A few Utah species migrate, similar to birds, heading south in the winter to remain active throughout the year.
There are a lot of misconceptions about bats. Bats are not blind. That's one of them. You always hear that all the time, right? Blind as a bat. Bats actually have very good eyesight. Not all bats carry rabies. Rabies can actually be found in all mammals. Bats do carry rabies, and humans have contracted rabies from bats. But the actual incidence or occurrence of rabies in wild bat populations is fairly low. It's estimated to be well below 3% in wild bats and probably more like 1%.
Scott Gibson is a wildlife biologist with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources stationed in Price, Utah. More specifically, he is the terrestrial non-game biologist, meaning he works with wildlife that is not targeted by hunters in the state. Mostly, he focuses on birds and mammals. And Scott knows more than a few things about bats.
Yeah, so there are a few other misconceptions about bats. There are vampire bats, and I say we do have in the world, but not here in Utah. Our bats are not bloodsuckers. We do not have any bats in the state of Utah that are not insectivores, so all of our bats eat nothing but insects.
Another misconception centers on bats and mosquitoes. Most bats eat larger insects like moths and beetles. Yes, mosquitoes do get devoured by these incredibly gifted hunters. But for most types of bats, it is only a minor part of their daily diet, as they offer little in the way of energy return for the foraging effort. Throughout the United States, scientists estimate that healthy bat populations translate to more than $3.8 billion a year in reduced crop damage and pesticide use. And that means fewer pesticides enter the ecosystem. Because bats are such a critical species for the delicate balance of our Utah ecosystems, the Utah Division of Wildlife spends time and money studying this precious resource.
So we're out here, and this is part of a statewide effort that we do every 3 years to try and get a handle on how bats are doing in the state of Utah. And so we tended to do bat surveys every year, but this is our big statewide push that we do every few years. And so what we do is 3 times during the summer, so starting in June, usually June, July, and in August, we will put out acoustic detectors. And acoustic detectors will actually pick up the high frequency echolocation calls of bats. And so that allows us to actually go back and run it through computer software. It gives us a sonogram that we can then determine what bat species we're flying over if conditions were right.
Scott and his predecessor have set up polygon-shaped study zones, 10 miles wide, that were randomly selected across the state. In the southeastern region, Scott has established 13 in which data is collected on all bat species that are captured and released or recorded on the acoustic detectors. The study occurs every 3 years between June and August. Today, Scott and his crew visit the polygon in the San Rafael Swell in Emery County, a beautiful landscape known for the Wedge Overlook, also known as the Little Grand Canyon.
We're here in Emery County. This is where we're netting for bats tonight. And we, Emery County being a big county, we do a lot of netting. Several of our polygons fall here in Emery County. We have 18 species of bat here in the state of Utah, and probably every single species of bat could, in theory, be found here in Emery County.
This bat study started in 2009, and thus far, the data suggests that bat populations in Utah are fairly healthy and consistent. This baseline data will prove invaluable if populations decline. By constantly observing and reporting any abnormalities, these bat populations have a better chance for long-term survival. To catch bats, Scott and his team use mist nets stretched across small bodies of water in the desert.
And the reason that we use water is because bats, when they come out of their daily torpor or their daily hibernation, one of the first things they want to do is come in and drink. And so when they come in to drink, they'll fly into the pond, and the hope is that they've been to this pond before and that they're not going to be echolocating.
Bats locate prey using high-frequency sounds inaudible to humans. The echoes generated create sound pictures that let bats see their environment. But turns out, like other mammals, bats can get lazy. That is why these nets work. If bats have frequented a certain spot, like this watering hole, they may not be as meticulous with echolocating their surroundings. If they were, they would easily avoid these nets.
Weight on this one is 5.5 grams. And what I'm looking for is this little bit that sticks out just at the base of his ear there. That's called the tragus.
The species most commonly captured also happens to be the smallest. The bat seen here being processed by Scott and his crew is commonly known as the canyon bat.
We have several species of myotis bat, which is a group of bats that are also generally fairly small, and we could equally catch probably any of them in the location that we are. Where we're kind of situated right now in Emery County, we're kind of mid-elevation, and so we have some pinyon juniper habitat around us, which would bring down some of the higher elevation bats, and then we also have some open desert habitat.
One of the largest species of bats seen by Scott through his tagging work is the hoary bat. These bats travel long distances, migrating all the way to Central America.
Big brown bats are another one. They're a fairly cosmopolitan bat, so we find them oftentimes in neighborhoods and in towns. When I go out on nuisance bat calls, if somebody has one on a porch or in their house, oftentimes it's a big brown because they're fairly common in those areas. So there's a wide range of bats that we could find here. Again, there's 18 species, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to get, some of them are more rare than others, so it might surprise me to get them, but it wouldn't surprise me that they're here in Emery County. So when we bring them to the table, we're looking at various morphometric measurements, so measurements like forearm length on the bats, we're looking at ear length, tragus length, which is the part of the earlobe. So we're looking at things like that, which all tell us potentially what species they are. And there's other characteristics we want to look for. Sometimes we have to pull the wing out and see if they have fur on the inside of the wing. So there's different things that we need to look for. So adult female, and she's, I'd say, post-lactating. So she was lactating at one time. She's post-lactating now. There's a lot of threats to bats. Habitat loss, white nose syndrome, which fortunately we have not detected in Utah yet, but it has been detected in adjacent states. So we want to kind of stay ahead of the curve, so when bats do begin to decline, we can have the data out there to show us, what does this decline look like? What are things that we can possibly do to help mitigate these declines? And where in Utah do we have these bat species, and how can we help them?
Bats are an important indicator species for overall ecosystem health. They act as a canary in the coal mine. If bat populations suddenly show signs of decline, it is likely an indicator that the larger ecosystem is out of balance and that other species which are not being studied could also face trouble. And so, the state of Utah and the Division of Wildlife Resources have good reason to monitor bat populations and health very closely.
We also want to be able to tell if we're getting males and females. Specifically, if we're getting females, we want to know, are they lactating females? Are they females that have pups, back at a roosting site?
One of the strangest facts about our Utah bats is the way they reproduce, which happens in the fall.
Once the mating has taken place, the females will typically overwinter with the sperm and have what's called delayed implantation, and they will actually implant and fertilize in the spring. And then that's when they're going to have their pups. And most bat species have one pup, but we do have some bat species that have two. There's one species which occasionally has four, but it's typically one pup. In Utah with our Utah bats.
If bats reproduced more often with more offspring, their populations would not be so prone to collapse. But because Utah bats are slow reproducers, one baby per year per mating pair, the resource managers tasked with protecting bats work hard to understand what's happening to bat populations and any factors threatening their survival.
Habitat conservation is huge. So contributing to any projects that are going to conserve habitat, whether it's sagebrush habitat, pinyon juniper habitat, wetland habitat, those are all really important for bats. So if those are things that people can contribute, both money, time, effort, things like that to projects that are restoring habitat, that's great.
Utah's bat species, fortunately, are currently absent from the federally threatened or the endangered species lists, though 6 are considered species of special concern. One of the most worrisome recent occurrences is a fungal disease called white nose syndrome, which kills some species of bats while in hibernation. While this fungus has affected bats in neighboring states, it hasn't been detected in Utah yet.
Don't go away, more Utopia after a word from our incredible sponsors.